It's time to step out now into cosmos, into mythos, into psyche.
Welcome back, my fellow travelers. If it's your first time, welcome to the show. As I record this, the moon is slipping into this very sexy sextile to the Venus-Jupiter conjunction on the Galactic Center, which I thought was a perfect time to record this show about, well, a Jupiter cycle, but also talking about this transition from Jupiter in Sag to Jupiter in Capricorn with my dear friend, Ari Moshe. Also, something I wrote about it recently about the conjunction of Venus and Jupiter, and I forgot to mention Ophiuchus, i.e. Asclepius. If you listen to the Edward Tick podcast about dream healing, then you're aware of the Asclepians, the work, what can happen in there that is in the dreams. And so one would imagine that when the two benefics, Venus, Jupiter, come together on the Galactic Center, one can imagine one of those big dreams, as Jung talked about. And so hopeful encounters to you all that you will meet the God of healing in these darkening times as you sleep after you listen to this podcast. This show is kind of in the spirit of my old ones, the original ones, the ones that have gone missing. And Ari has been with the show since the very beginning, ever since 2009, when I started it. And we're both these two gypsy souls who have always been such great mirrors for each other. He claims to be Jupiter. I suppose if I were to claim a god, I'd be Mercury. But it's such a fun thing to reflect on because he and I have known each other nearly for 12 years. And even though I was kind of studying astrology a little bit before we lived together actually in Olympia, Washington, it was really being around him and seeing him practice, receiving a reading from him, and just kind of being in that incubator that fall that got me started in this whole journey. And so infinite gratitude does go out to Ari Moshe for that. And well, we talk about it a little bit in the show as well, so I don't need to go on here. But it is a show, yes, about Jupiter, but it's also a show about authenticity. And it's going to be a sweet listen, hopefully, for your ears, a simple one. I do hope that you learn something from our stories and our journeys together and with Jupiter. And if at any point while you're listening to this, you feel like, I'm not alone in this journey that I'm on, well, please consider just for a moment leaving some stars on your podcast app that you're listening to this on. You can leave a review as well if you feel inspired with the words. That's totally okay. But the podcast app is where you do it. You can't do it, unfortunately, on Spotify or Podcast Addict, however you're listening. Can't do it on my site. It has to be the podcast app, which is on Macs now, and it's also on phones and tablets, Mac products. And if you also really want to support the show and be a part of the blooming community, you can go over to patreon.com/AdamSummer and add a little bit of the trade winds into the sales over there by becoming a patron at any of the levels. There's going to be the 37th Astrology Parlor tomorrow, which will be the 24th of November. We're going to talk about living astrology, living myth in that parlor. And by becoming a patron at that level, which is the 5 level, you also get access to all the other parlors, which is days of content, and the patron-only podcasts. And I also have added this new level to the Patreon, which is the 50, which gives you everything that I offer on there, including the monthly class, the slow release of the apprenticeship recordings, and then what we're also doing once a month is the student parlor. So everyone that's watching the apprenticeship classes, we're meeting once a month and we're talking about all of it. And there is an option as well to get certified with me at that level. So it's quite the deal. Just $50 a month and you get what I think, if I do the calculations right in my head, it's 8 hours plus of content that's fresh every month. And so you can go to patreon.com/AdamSummer to sign up there. Also, this is an important announcement. We now have one slot that is open for the Peru retreat in January from the 13th to the 26th in Tarapoto. If you want to do something like an Asclepion with us in Peru, well, there's a slot for you. So reach out to me on social media or via email on my site, and hopefully we can fit you in. There's still some time to make those travel plans, and what an auspicious time too with this ingress happening with Jupiter. And so just a little intro on Ari. He is one of my dear friends, as I have spoke about. Also, you can visit his work at arimoshe.com. He also has an album that's coming out very soon. You can find the links to that on his site, and you can also sign up for sessions with him, subscribe to his YouTube, etc., etc. And so without any further words, I give you Ari Moshe and I having a conversation about Jupiter. Enjoy, and I will see you on the other side.
Hey, brother. Good to be here.
Yeah, it's been, well, actually, we caught up about a month ago, but still in a podcast format. I think it's been, 2-3 years, I bet.
Yep.
So for anyone that might be new to you, how would you introduce yourself these days?
I don't know. I'm living in Sonoma. I'm having a baby. I'm an evolutionary astrologer. I'm a musician. So I'm coming up with an album really soon. My first full-length studio album with my devotional love music, and giving birth to a baby just right after then. And yeah, I do sessions. I teach classes.
That's a good intro. A very eventful intro as well. I like this intro. You know what I was thinking about today as the day was going by, knowing that I was going to talk to you tonight, was how it's almost exactly 12 years since you and I met.
Is that true?
Yeah. I have the chart up in my solar fire. I have a few charts of things that happened, like the first reading you gave me in the treehouse, a ceremony that you and I did, and Jupiter was in Capricorn that fall of 2008.
It was, okay, yeah.
So for everyone listening, Ari and I are both born in 83, 6 months apart. He's the Sag, I'm the Gemini, but we're both Virgo rising. And so this means that Jupiter was in both of our fifth houses when we met. And focusing on the birthing of things, the birthing of your first album, the birthing of your first child. So interesting that it's all going to occur. Jupiter's in Cap. You said 6 weeks, right?
Soon, yeah.
Well, he moves into Cap early December. That's under the timeline, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, my daughter will definitely have Jupiter in Capricorn on the South Node.
And so what are your thoughts about that? Because you have that too.
We'll find out. Well, it's interesting because she's a Capricorn Jupiter. I'm the South Node Sag Jupiter. So all I can say is I'm in a Capricorn phase, and in terms of structuring my reality, grounding, growing roots, taking care of family. It's a very Capricorn thing. I can't say anything else than that, but she'll be a grounded teacher, perhaps. More. Who knows? A big part of my life journey has been a lot of traveling, and in that I feel maybe a lot of wandering as well. And that my soul path has been finding a greater wisdom and insight into what home really means for me. So this family is a new adventure. It's a new experience for me. It's like a new Sagittarius adventure into, okay, this is what life is doing. This is the next pilgrimage. She's coming into that. So it's all very much a very interesting mystery of, God, what's this all about,
Yeah. Well, it's something that I can relate to, and many of my listeners as well that have been with me for a while. It's like the theme of this year since Jupiter has been in Sag has kind of been the weird road for me. And like I left Boulder, did retreats all around the place, traveled, ended up in England, second visit in England. I myself am settling. It's this feeling that you and I can both really relate to in each other of having such similar charts, but also this Jupiter and Sag theme. Like it's our third Jupiter return, and we've been living a particular way for so long. And like I feel it too. I'm not having a kid yet, but I am settling into something in a way that feels new. And I don't know, I can't get ahead of myself, but the feeling is like there's very white hairs going into the earth, right? Like this, like fresh roots are happening, and it's a very fertile place where I'm at in the West Country here in England, and it's so nourishing, and I haven't really felt that in my life. I can confidently say that I've never felt it, and I feel it. So it's nice to know, and I just want to say too, maybe this could be an exploration for the both of us, that before Jupiter ingressed in Sag last fall, there was a lot of speculation maybe that I had around what it would bring. And one of the first things that had occurred was my first trip to Europe. And I went to Crete for this storytelling retreat, which was pretty appropriate for a Jupiter and Sag moment. Jupiter line as well, astrocartography wise. And then, are you familiar with Deb Silverman? Do you know who she is?
I've heard of her. Is she an astrologer?
She is, yeah. She's a wild astrologer with the same birthday as me in Boulder. And we were on this bike ride around Boulder, and she was telling me, she's like, by the end of your Jupiter return in Sag in your fourth house and all that, you're going to be living in the best place you've ever lived. It's going to be the most amazing place. I'm like, do you tell this to all your clients? She's like, yeah. And I was like, well, I hope you are right, because it was in the wake of a pretty unfortunate event that did relate to home, actually. And I just was faithless around that idea. But here I am pretty much 12 months later, and it occurred. And so, Deb, I know you're not listening to this, but for any of your students, you can relay it to Deb that she was right.
Well, it's interesting because I guess just before I met you, 12 years prior, during my first Jupiter return, in my early 20s, I was traveling. I have Jupiter on my fourth house cusp. So I was studying astrology with Adam Gainsbourg. Yep. At that time in Maryland. And I would travel with my books. I had these boxes of books with me that I would take with me wherever I went. And I actually got certified by him the day of my Jupiter return. But that whole phase in my life, it was actually not so much about moving to a new home, but moving, like lots and lots and lots of movement. It's like my journey shifted to a new phase of not necessarily wandering, because I moved back to Olympia, and it was actually, just shortly thereafter that I met you. But I lived in probably 6 different homes over the next couple of years. And the journey just took on this new quality of discovery, experiencing what it's like to be giving readings, to embodying myself in this world in a new way, where I'm embodying more of that teacher quality. And we take it to now. I built out my van the last couple of years. I've been living in my van, like the coolest home I've ever experienced. And I get pregnant. And then the week that Jupiter comes back to Jupiter and also enters my fourth house, I move to a new home. I move Michelle's everything from the old home to this home, get furniture, orient myself. Like in just a matter of a week, my whole life transformed from living in a van to settling in a home, living in proximity to my co-parent, to her son, and everything's changed entirely. And so this Jupiter experience for me of, going through my Jupiter return, Jupiter moving through my fourth house, is a really interesting contrast to what it was in the past. And this is the one thing I want to share about Jupiter. We can have 2 experiences with Jupiter, and one is sort of more the extroverted expansion, like new journey, new experiences, entering into a world that will expand your horizons, but there isn't necessarily going to be a stabilization, because it's about the journey. It's about the experience and the growth. But then there can be also this other element of Jupiter where we find that expansiveness in the ordinary. So Jupiter in the fourth house can be home is on the road just as much as it can be your spiritual journey is at home. And ultimately the two are the same because this life is all very temporary. And whether I'm traveling or I'm living in a spot for however long, it's all very, very short. Like these are all just stations along the journey. And I think a very healthy Jupiter perspective is appreciating that whatever form our journey looks right now, it's just a form. It's just a very small moment. And to be a good traveler is to really be present and accommodate to where you are right now, not be so fixed and trying to possess and hold this very concrete idea of like, okay, this is what my life has to be. This is my journey for the next 30 years. We have all these phases. And, a wise teacher once told me many, many years ago that a very Sagittarian Jupiter, journey for me is you might have this experience in life of, raising a family, being in one place for a long time. Then you might have the experience of traveling the world and teaching and sharing music and doing all kinds of other things. And there's, of course, no qualitative difference between the two, but it's all Jupiter. And we stop growing, we stop learning the moment we look at our experience as sort of like the static, non-growth state. Even if it's traveling, it's like we can travel and be restless and be seeking, but not really growing from the teachings of life. And we can be in one place, but miss out on all the teachings. Like I'm here living with a 6-year-old who is freaking teaching me so much. Like he's living in the moment. He's playing. He sees everything as an opportunity. He's an amazing Jupiter teacher for me. And so, yeah, this is a really amazing experience of learning about Jupiter in a way that isn't so much about movement, but gleaning greater wisdom and teachings from the ordinary. So maybe that's what she'll teach me. I mean, she already is teaching. Like this soul coming in has been transforming my life. So I have immense respect and reverence for her, but she's definitely teaching me something about gleaning and growing and discovering more from less.
Hard-earned wisdom, Ari. Hard-earned. And there's a couple of things I'd like to say to that to go deeper into this Jupiter-ness that we've decided to explore. And one of them I know is something that you don't necessarily work with a ton because you're very much influenced by the EA take on things, but it's the domicile of Jupiter being in Sag. And I think that there's a big shift that's about to occur because Jupiter is ingressing into Capricorn in less than a month, and it's full. And these dignities have taught me a lot in my own journey since you and I met. And there's no doubt something to them as far as like gleaning an essence of how that planet expresses. And so, I mean, throughout the entire past year, like Jupiter in Sag has been, I think for many of us, a silver lining experience in contrast to the boneyard with Pluto and Saturn and the South Node and so many of the other influences that have been taking place. And so I am curious about your take on that. But then the other thing I want to mention, which I think will put enough wind in our sails for a bit here, is the differences between each return. Because like around 12, we can almost think about it like as a physical pubescence, because it is around that time when we grow into a different type of human, pretty much. And then around 24, we now know that the prefrontal cortex fully comes online. And then at 36, there's a lot of ideas like from 35 to 36 that like Saturn matures at that age, according to the Vedic astrologers, but the Buddha was also enlightened around that age. And so there's something like very deeply grounding around soul and spirit kind of coming together in body around this age that you and I now are in. And so like this external expanse that we have experienced with gypsy blood, Sag blood in us is kind of condensing into something else. And you're spot on about the journey being at home too. Like I feel so expansive just being in this little studio. And I'm just
Yeah.
this little studio in Dartmoor, and it's wonderful. I absolutely love it. And so a lot of ideas there, but I think it can take us places. What do you think?
Beautiful. Well, I definitely see immense value and potency in those last 10 degrees of any sign.
Mm-hmm.
So Jupiter moving through Sag at this last phase of it is sort of a culmination type of experience. And I think it's important to remember that as long as Jupiter is in Sagittarius, the quality of experience is focused entirely around realization. And so there might be, a lot of different changes that are occurring in our life, but this particular archetype corresponds to the expansion of awareness, cultivating deeper insight and understanding into the nature of our reality, our personal path in life, our personal destiny. That's what Jupiter does. It just really expands our context to see more of the truth, expand our awareness further. But when it moves into Capricorn, we're looking at a crystallization of that knowledge in a way where that wisdom, that insight can be made manifest in a conscious way. And there's just something that astrology teaches me, that we are one with the cycles, and they're sort of moving us. They're, shaping us. We can't resist them. We can't speed them. They're one with our own being. So in honoring what this journey is right now, and there's this graveyard in Capricorn, Jupiter is moving towards that. We got this happy-go-lucky dude moving into Capricorn, approaching Saturn and Pluto. And that's going to be really, really interesting. When we move from Sagittarius into Capricorn, there's a refinement and sort of like a gravity, like a dropping into a more sobering and practical awareness of what we are actually growing. There isn't necessarily the adequate maturity in Sagittarius to understand the long-term vision, to understand where all of this is going, and to create the necessary structure to nurture a long-term growth process. But when we move into Capricorn, there's a maturation that occurs there. And this allows for such a, when we put Jupiter in there, it's like a joyful appreciation of boundaries, and like the wealth and the stability and the health and the wellness that can be established in one's life and for one's family and future generations by experiencing this journey, and the wisdom that can only come, like the healing and the insight and the understanding that can only come through commitment. And there's a certain gift that offers. And in terms of the different qualities of the Jupiter return, I mean, we have this particular Jupiter return. Yeah, you mentioned the Vedic thing, but also practically, our Jupiter return at 35 or so is just before our first Saturn square since our Saturn return.
Yeah.
And so even if it's not literally at that square, the phase of the Saturn, we're in that crescent phase moving to the first quarter. So that particular phase of Saturn having moved almost 90 degrees, separating from its natal position, the energy of it is actually very internal. Like that phase, I'm curious what your thoughts are on this too. Like the energy before the 90-degree aspect is very internal. It's like consciousness really becomes withdrawn and self-aware and self-practice and self-intimate. There's just and you think about Saturn, like what are you doing between your Saturn return and age 35? It's like very subjective at first. You're just sort of kind of figuring things out. And it takes a few years, 32, 33, until really the Saturn teachings tend to kind of become a little more crystallized, and that grows and deepens. Yeah. And when you get to your Saturn return at 36 or 37 or whatever,
Square.
Saturn square. I feel like there's a certain level of mastery that really starts to peak then. And Jupiter happening just before that is like, I think really a part of that. It is a time for much. I mean, think about Jupiter return, nodal return, Saturn square. Yeah. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of fortuitous expansion and healthy openings that occur within those couple years.
Well, I'd love to add to that, Ari. So, what I've been thinking about a lot about this ingress is the Holy Trinity of like Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva,
Mm.
and how Jupiter in Cap very much feels like Vishnu to me. It's a preserver of, like you were just kind of articulating, of like what we have acquired, what visions we have seen, what have we learned through all of our journeying, and applying it to our lives in a very practical sense. And so, in a way, it's preserving everything that we have gathered thus far. And the square, like when you ask that, like I know exactly what you're getting at, but what I would add to it, maybe from almost like a polarity perspective, is the like Rudyard, when he talks about the waxing square, it's like this idea of like a crisis in manifestation. I forget, crisis in action is what he calls it, but like I think of it as like a crisis in manifestation. So whatever we declared on a soul level around the Saturn return, like it is definitely being tested to a certain extent. But like when you're talking about this feeling of mastery over it, it's like we're really familiar with Saturn's voice by this age. And so it's a different square than we were Dylan's age, like the 6-year-old that you're with. Like he's going through it, but it's the first one. And so we're older, we're wiser. And so in dealing with it, like I know for myself, like one of the main declarations I made with my Saturn return was to finally take this work more seriously, because everything before it was, in a way, just, I mean, it's not that I didn't take it seriously, but it was more whimsical and just kind of a hobby, I suppose. And when the Saturn return occurred, I was like, like I really do enjoy doing astrology. And if I'm going to preserve this podcast and this work, like I'm going to take it deeper. And that, it required like a deeper education around speech and storytelling and writing and taking more on, having more responsibility and all of that. And like I feel like no matter what hits me in these years, like around the crisis in action or manifestation, that like I have what it takes, right, to persevere because of everything that I've been shown up to this point. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Beautiful. Yeah.
Because we're going through it together. You're such a mirror for me. I mean, I think that you've taken the Sag a little further than I have, because you are the
no
Sag.
choice.
Yeah, I mean, but we both have Uranus, Jupiter, Neptune, South Node, and Sag. But then you have the Sun, Mercury. What else? Is it Venus too?
Sun and Mercury. That's
Sun and
it.
Mercury. That's it. Yeah. And then I'm the Gemini part. So yeah, it's like, I mean, I've done it too my whole life. Like I've, until recently, never lived somewhere longer than 2 years. And, I really want that to change, because I see the value in allowing those little fuzzy hairs to go into the soil. Like there's something really deep about it. And it's just amazing. Like as a mirror, like seeing you do it and I'm doing it. And I have other friends now that are born around our 83 that are Virgo risings just like us, and they're doing it too. And so there is something to this age. And so for anybody listening as well, whether you're Virgo rising or not, just these bigger cycles, like Ari was speaking about, like this age with the nodal return, the Saturn square, and the third Jupiter return. We're growing up.
Yeah, we are. Just getting started. Just getting started. And I started my YouTube channel around my Saturn return as well. But see, my journey is really interesting in that I've always had this push-pull, love-hate relationship with being an astrologer. I mean, since you met me, it's always been this like, okay, I carry this beautiful lineage. I'm very skillful at it. It supports me. I'm grateful for that. And yet there's always been this deep yearning and calling in me to connect with this more devotional quality in my life. And it's almost like this purity and this longing that's just always there. And so this whole phase of my life has been this process of feeling like sort of subtly subtly penetrating into like what's this feeling that I've been carrying along my whole life, this sense of there's something more. And what I've been uncovering during this Jupiter return time in particular has been the energy of authenticity. And like they say Jupiter's leaps of faith and all that kind of stuff. It's really about being authentic. There's a certain quality of sincerity that when we access that, there's a sort of power and fuel underneath our actions that make it almost impenetrable. When we're not coming from sincerity and it's just a thing that we've been doing or a thing that we've already told ourselves we need to be, the power isn't there, the fuel isn't there. But that sense of inner truth, that sense of, no, this is right for me. And I can't say why, it doesn't make sense. Maybe others don't understand. But that's a really important quality for this Jupiter journey. Like, what really feels true for you? And I think Jupiter moving into Capricorn in respect to that actually speaks to really planting the seeds and beginning to grow that. So this YouTube channel, I'm sharing, I'm just giving myself more permission. I've been posting some pretty cool videos just talking about ideas of astrology, and astrology is not about causality. I posted a video today about ambiguity, because there's always some ambiguity when you read a chart. Birth times aren't always exact, and you could have a planet on a house cusp, and just talking about levels of understanding, levels of consciousness, and bringing the spirit and the devotional and the qualities of love and curiosity and interest into talking about astrology. So that's been feeling really cool for me. But there's this like movement to sing more and to interview people. Like, I want to talk about kind of like what I see you've done in your own way, where there's astrology, but there's been this expansion that is so authentic to who you are as a being, to include all these other elements. And so there's this blossoming happening for me. And I think that's a part of the maturation. Like, we all have our own training. We have our own, lineage and our practices, that which we have practiced and learned. But as we mature, it's not about being a practitioner of this or doing this thing. It has to encompass something far more authentic. And that might become its own, form or structure or paradigm or whatever. But the actual path that we're walking has to come from this sincerity of like, this is what it's like for me to be me as a teacher. This is what it's like for me to be me as a father. And one of the downfalls of Jupiter is we don't often give ourselves that space to be honest with ourselves. And so we could have this Jupiter experience that's actually almost depressing, because it can breed a deep psychology of alienation, of living a life that doesn't feel authentic to oneself. And so the Jupiter quality of, well, somewhere else will be better for me, or someone else, or someplace else, some other time, always feeling like I need to go, that there's some other place and time for me. And that's that restlessness and the grass is always greener syndrome of Jupiter. But when we know that we are free, I have a song that I wrote, and this song actually came to me in a dream. And the words are, "Freedom is my holy name." And I had that dream again last night where I heard that song being sung, and it's on my album. But actually I heard it in my dream, and it was like produced really nicely. I'm like, whoa. I think I have drumming on my album, but not on that song. But I heard it with drumming, and it was like, amazing. And then I woke up, I'm like, oh, do I redo it? And the answer is no. I can record again later. I'm not redoing that song. But there's a teaching of you're free. And that freedom isn't like a freedom to get up and do anything that you want, but the freedom is a freedom to notice what's right for you, what's intuitively aligned with your path. And when we catch that energy of sincerity, then we can make choices in our life according to wherever we are. And life supports us. Life orchestrates itself to really harmonize with our authentic orientation. So I forgot how that started off, but there's that.
Freedom is your holy name. And I think there was a part of what you were saying, a lot of what you just said was so wonderfully stated around Jupiter, but there was this part that I thought really kind of encapsulated the shadow of what we might be stepping into with Jupiter and Capricorn, which is where ideas and truth become encapsulated or coded into systems.
Yeah,
And people become dogmatic. And it's something that is in every system. It's in every path, in every branch of astrology as well. And I think this is a really important piece for everyone listening, because I mean, you have stuck to a particular way of doing astrology more than I have. Yet your mind is never closed. Not even a little bit. Like like you're still open. Or I don't know if you're laughing because you think that's not true, but for me, I think it's true, right?
It's true. I'm laughing probably because it's very true.
It's very true. I thought you were laughing because maybe you didn't think it was true. No, it definitely is true.
Like, where are the boundaries? But yeah.
And it's something I witness often, where it's not just in any generation. It happens to the best of us, where we find a particular technique or a house system or a certain way of interpreting, say, Jupiter, and don't have the capacity of entertaining another insight or another way of doing things. And I think that as we pretty much approach everything in our lives, it's absolutely prerequisite to have a beginner's mind. Like, it's the best way to live. And it's also, to me, the most glorious way of studying something like astrology, because there's no human being that has ever lived that knows everything there is to know about astrology. It's impossible. And so, like, if you have a beginner's mind and you're constantly willing to learn from your clients, learn from teachers, learn from every moment you engage with this material, I mean, it becomes an eternal quest for what? I mean, it's just an adventure, really. And I wanted to bring that point up in relation to your paradox, because I mean, you know that about me too. Like, I've had a love-hate dynamic with it as well, where I mean, I've always loved astrology, but like there's baggage that comes with it. And I've just had to get over a lot of that, because what I've realized, like for you, it's like wanting this devotional path. And for me, there's all these other parts of me too that like just weren't getting airtime. And I felt, especially with the old show, I felt like I was being fraudulent to myself, because there was topics I wasn't exploring. There was ideas that I would not say because I felt like they would offend people, or they like whatever. Like, I was doing things. I was basically making choices influenced by a collective narrative. And then changing the name of the podcast, I was like, wait. Like, I need to give myself an infinite amount of possibilities to explore all that I'm interested in. Of course, astrology will be like the hub of the wheel, but it has to be this way. And it was really interesting too, and how I didn't know what I was going to call the new show. And I think it was a dream. It just happened. It just fell right into my lap. It was like, the name of your website, dummy. It's like, oh yeah, that's a great name for a podcast. Right. Holes to Heavens. It's not a porn site. It's a place where we search where we search for wholeness, and we go down rabbit holes, And yeah, it really worked. And in the process, I lost probably 2/3 of my listeners, but that's okay. Like, it was an authentic choice to use that concept that you're talking about. And I feel an infinite amount of inspiration now, because I can do whatever I want. I can have whoever I want on the show, and just like always bring it back to the hub if it's inspired to do so. But like, if I want to talk about dream healing, or if I want to talk about to a musician that I love, like, I can do that now. And I just don't feel like I need to make any excuses. And like, that has been a huge part of Jupiter educating me.
I love that.
Yeah.
There's such a teaching there that we often confuse quantity with quality. So this whole idea of, things are working out, it's successful, I have a lot of followers. And, and I relate to that as well. Just never having been super active with social media or things like that, there's a certain pressure of, well, I get my business from being an astrologer. Like, there's a certain sense of like, this is what work, this is what people expect. There's a time around my Jupiter return, actually my Saturn return, where I stopped calling my work astrology.
Right.
And I changed it to, I think, intuitive guidance sessions. And because that was more authentic to what I'm actually doing, it's not about reading a chart and then I have to somehow fit this criteria of giving people information, but it's more the present moment and what wants to happen. But there's a really powerful piece in Jupiter of mistaking the quantity and the appearance of things as a quality that, when you really look at it, takes away from authentic presence. And so oftentimes with Jupiter, we have to let go. We have to lose things or release things in order to receive. Because in being authentic, there's an appearance, there's a perception of certain qualities falling away, certain expressions, certain people, certain whatever. Because of course, it's like when you make a choice, other choices will not be available. But if that choice is authentic, it becomes a portal for the whole universe. It's like we can infinitely expand if we're being authentic, even if that means we lose 99% of everything else. Mm-hmm. There's a portal for a wide opening, much greater than anything else that we had. And it may not be even about going big or like it meant everyone's path is different, but the true expansion is the joy and the wellness and the alignment that a person experiences in doing exactly what is right for them. So that's a beautiful reflection. I think one of the downfalls with Jupiter is, like we were saying, there can be that dogma with Jupiter and Capricorn of, this is the way. But it can also be like, this is how I make money. This is my job. I'm a teacher and these are the things that I do. And suddenly, like, something that was fresh and spontaneous, it came from this authentic soul journey of discovery and realization. It's now become static and two-dimensional. And this happened, even the whole notion of people who are doing any kind of spiritual teaching, there's always this phase in their life where they're humble and they're beginner mind. And they're not trying to be what they're not. And that's why they have the realizations that they've had. They allow themselves to be adequately empty, to be filled by reality. And there's almost inevitably this phase that teachers go through of becoming someone. It's like that beginner's mind is lost. And often that leads to a certain downfall that, takes them deeper into their emptiness.
Yeah. That happened. That's exactly right. Like, you articulated it perfectly. Like, there comes a moment when it's static. Like, everything that you've discovered along the path becomes quote unquote teaching or whatever it is. And there's like a signature stamped to it. And then you get imprisoned by it. And I mean, for folks like us or anyone listening that has a ton of mutable planets in their chart, it's like the moment that I saw the bars forming around me, and there was demand on me, like I was looking for an escape route instantly. I was like, this can't happen. Like I can't ever feel like I'm being trapped by this. And I think I speaking it out loud, sometimes this is what we must do to make it real, like the experience. Like, I had not thought about Jupiter's time in Sag in this way until you and I are talking about it. Like, for the most part, it's been this weird road, this journey for myself, because it's also been 12 years since I first moved to Boulder and went to Naropa. So like, there was like that part of it. Like, I moved there to go to Naropa when Jupiter was in Sag, and then I had to leave. Like, it was itching. Like, there was like a phase that was ending. That was the main way that I was relating to this time. And then speaking out loud, I think that's the more meta lesson of what was occurring through this past year. And so, like, what a cool time to talk about it with you. Like, we have the days are counting. We don't have much time left with him. And to be able to distill what we've learned, I recommend everyone listening to do that. Like, to really think about the last year and to find someone to talk to about it. Like, have a really good tea session with someone and just try to talk it out and discover something about what happened.
That's beautiful.
So you're working on a book about him?
Oh yeah, I forgot. I'm doing that too.
Tell us.
Yeah. Well, I'm writing a book on Jupiter. It's actually probably more than halfway done at this point. For a while, I was writing a weekly article series, just covering as many topics of Jupiter as I can possibly muster up. So, I talk about nature, honesty, sincerity, the psychology of alienation, the psychology of overdoing it, the notions of opportunism, and even the psychology of pessimism, which comes with Jupiter as well. And just telling stories, giving a lot of personal insights and anecdotes. And the second half of the book is actually going to be applying all that, kind of categorizing it into like, all right, here are the different, all the different pieces of Jupiter that I've written about. Now let's take it through the 12 houses, and I'll write a little bit more about Jupiter retrograde and talk about transits and things like that. So, my motivation for this is pretty direct. I honestly don't feel like, and you're probably a lot more aware of the literature out there than I am, but I just don't know of any, honestly, I don't know of many quality books on the planets in general. Like most of the content that I found doesn't, to me, hold the level of like soul awareness and depth that I'm seeking in astrology. That really is what turned me on to Jeff Green in the first place. So looking at Jupiter and kind of moving beyond those common associations of luck and leaps of faith and saying, well, Jupiter is what's natural. Jupiter is nature. Jupiter is authenticity because nature is authentic. And so finding our path with Jupiter is actually about learning about our authentic self. And what is our authentic self? What is honesty? What is sincerity? And then understanding what does it mean to not be sincere? What is lying? And why do we lie? Why do we overcompensate and try to make ourselves things that we are not? Looking at Jupiter in all these different dimensions and understanding the psychology of trying to be what we're not, because that's an idea that we've painted. I feel like these are nuances that just need to be spoken about more. And it's almost autobiographical because I am Jupiter. I am. So it's such a strong archetype in my chart. And even Chiron is in the 9th house, and Chiron aspects all but one planets in my chart. So there's something cathartic and healing for me to write. And as long as I'm coming from a place of authenticity and I'm, drawing upon my own direct realizations, that it yields a lot of growth for me. So it's been a really good experience for me writing these articles. And yeah, that's one project that I'm doing. I would actually really love to continue doing that. It's a matter of time and resources at this point in my life for how to manage that. So I've been checked out your Patreon and some other people. It's something I need to do at a certain point to kind of find more ways to write, create more really quality content, but be supported for that. I want to move on to Saturn, and I have a lot to share about the planets. I feel that one of my gifts as an astrologer is just a certain depth of insight and an ability to articulate these concepts and ideas in ways that can be accessible. And it's a joy for me to teach. It's a joy for me to speak from my own understanding and my blossoming realization. So that's something I hope to continue to explore.
And how perfect to work on that more structured part of the book once Jupiter.
Right, exactly. Yeah. Right.
The examples. And I can attest to everyone listening that if you're now just becoming familiar with Ari, I think about my session with you often. I mean, it was amazing. I think it was the third astrology reading I had, and the first couple really had no effect on me. And then when we were in that treehouse on that rainy day in fall in Olympia, I remember you had drawn my chart on a piece of cardboard from an old pizza or something like that. And you hardly even looked at it. Like we were just sitting in the treehouse, like you and I have found is one of our ways of hanging out, just sitting on cushions across from each other. And you just talked about my chart, but really not my chart so much. Like it just got straight to the essence of the soul work. And there was so much that you did bring up that had a really deep impact on me. Well, so much so that it made me seriously want to learn astrology. And then we started watching those old VHS tapes of Marie's.
Oh, yeah.
Because we lived together, everybody. There was a short stint where Ari Moshe and I did live together. And yeah, that was formative. That was the last time Jupiter was in Cap. That's crazy to think about it in that way.
Yeah, and let me say this. For all of our Jupiter signatures, we all have a connection to the archetype of the teacher and the archetype of the student.
Yeah.
And obviously for Jupiter, all of us, it's where we're learning, right? So we're receptive and we attract the different teachers and teachings and guides and all their forms that manifest. And we've both played that role for one. Like you introduced me to ceremony and working with plant medicine and many other things too. When we show up for one another in these ways, and our Jupiter signature also then speaks to a phase that we all need to play out in claiming our insight, claiming our knowledge and teaching, because that teaching is a way of tasting what we've realized. When we teach, when we articulate, and for me, like, when I do sessions and I'm in a space where I'm holding a container to attune to the truth and to serve another person's soul journey, that's a direct way for me to taste the wisdom and the insight and the knowledge that I've cultivated and learned over these years. And so teaching sort of crystallizes and completes our own individual training, our own journey, our own discovery, our own experience, as long as we're willing to really look inside. And so teaching, doing sessions is an opportunity for a refreshing rediscovery of these truths, but in a new way where we're able to understand it more deeply and live it more fully. And I think that's a really beautiful thing. And I want to say, sometimes I'm afraid that I give the impression that I don't like doing astrology.
Yeah, right. So, we say that, both of us. Yeah.
So I want everyone to know I am available and grateful to be in service with doing charts. I honestly still find some ambiguity in terms of what do I call myself? I'm a teacher, I'm an intuitive guide, I'm an astrologer, and that my work really is about being present and coming into a space of healing. And that's really the essence of it.
Good clarity. And I would like to say the same for everyone, that even though my show is not called Exploring Astrology anymore, like we both are doing this work, and I highly recommend reaching out to Ari if you feel called to working with him. There's a level of depth that you're not going to find with many other astrologers. So when did your book come out, you think?
I don't. I have to have more of a game plan first, and it's a album, daughter, book, and God knows what else. But those are the three agendas. The middle agenda is not really even on my timeline at all. So I don't have to worry about the daughter part. She's got that figured out.
I'm so happy for you. You're going to be a dad soon, and if you ever need to talk to me, you know my number. And
Thanks.
I can't wait. And how do people find you?
arimoshe.com. That's ARIMOSHE.com.
Straightforward.
And my album will be linked there soon. Right now I have a pre-release on my website. So we have 3 pre-release songs. But soon, within the next month, I anticipate you'll have 13 tracks.
Wow.
From my heart to yours.
It's a good number. Include Asclepius in it. Love it. Well, Ari, it's always a pleasure. I love an excuse to catch up with you and to record it for everybody as well.
Yep.
All right. Well, adios from across the pond.
All right, brother. Much love.
All right. Much love. Ciao. Well, hopefully that was nourishing food for your Jupiter's thoughts, and that did help build some optimism in you about the big transition that's coming up. Again, if you go to arimoshe.com, you can check out, I think it's 3 tracks of his upcoming album. You can also sign up for readings with him there, and also be on the lookout for his upcoming book on Jupiter. If you enjoyed this podcast, again, on your app, you can leave some stars or a review. This is how you build up the self-esteem of a podcast, but also help the algos and the bots find it in the Googleverse. And so Super easy, free way of doing it. You can also go to patreon.com and be a part of the parlor tomorrow, which is going to be number 37, Living Astrology and Living Myth. And there's also this new $50 level that allows you to be a part of everything I do on there. Patron-only shows, possible free readings, monthly class, apprenticeship classes, and also the capacity of getting certified while finding the tribe, meeting people that are on the same wave as you as far as your interest in astrology. And so you can go to patreon.com/AdamSummer and sign up there. Again, one slot left for the Peru retreat. If you're interested in doing the Asclepian-like work where plants and planets come together in a place like the Amazon, well, reach out to me and that spot is all yours. This podcast is brought to you by Solar Fire. The latest news on the Mac release is that early 2020 it has been pushed back to. And so if you do not have a Mac, you can purchase Solar Fire now and use promo code SOMA to get 15% off of the program on their site at labe.com. That is promo code SOMA to get some Solar Fire in your life. This podcast is also brought to you by Four Sigmatic. So as the sun fills its quiver with arrows, readying for sad season, it's never a bad idea to fill your pouch with medicinal mushrooms as well. This is by far the best company for that. I think that starting out with a 10 blend elixir is a good way to do it. Also, they have mushroom coffee for all of you coffee drinkers, and it doesn't have as much caffeine as all of their other coffees. There's cacao blends. There's just many wonderful things, even beauty products at foursigmatic.com. So if you use the same promo code, which is SOMA, you will get 10% off of any of their products. So just go to foursigmatic.com. You can also go to my site at holstoheavens.com to sign up for readings and classes. I highly recommend the complete reading, which is a way of getting 50% off of my sessions. And then we do 5 of them over the span of time. We go deep. And it, to me, is the great way of not just working with everything that you're going through, but also there's a great education around astrology and how, well, I work with it, but also I think there's a bit of a transmission that I give into you that will probably infect you. You'll get the astro bug, in other words, by doing the complete reading, or really any of the planetary journeys as well. That's the way of getting the great discounts, is they're all 50% off. It's just how I incentivize it. So you go to holstoheavens.com, and that's where you can sign up for such things. The music that's in the background that has brought us through this entire podcast is called the Blue Dot Sessions. Don't know much about them, but I've been greatly enjoying their music. You can check them out wherever music is found. I've been listening on Spotify, and if they're coming to your town, make sure you go and support their work. That's the way it is with all of these musicians on here. And yeah, get out there, see some live music, bring your honey out there and have fun. Why not? It's winter. Well, at least up here it's winter. Nearly winter. And so I'm going to leave you with a song by Ari Moshe himself. It's from his upcoming album. The song is called I Am Here. He thought it would be one that related quite well to our conversation. And so here it is, Ari Moshe, I Am Here. Thank you so much for listening to the show. Be well, be kind, and I will either talk with you next solo, all about Pluto, to continue our boneyard conversations, or it will be a continued exploration into the world of Tolkien with Becca Tarnas. Have not decided yet. We'll see where the spirit takes it. So anyways, enjoy this song. Thank you for listening, and I will talk with you soon enough.
I am here to live a joyful life, to love with all my heart and sing with all my might. I am here to live a joyful life, to love with all my heart and sing with all my might. To choose and move on. Create and let go. To choose and move on. Create and let go. I am here to live a joyful life, to love with all my heart and sing with all my might. Said I am here to live a joyful life, to love with all my heart and sing with all my might. To choose and move on. Create and let go. To choose and move on. Create and let go. Nay, 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 nay. Nay, 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 nay. Nay, 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 nay. Nay, 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 nay. Nay, 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 nay. Ya oh, ya ho ho hey yo. Ya ho, ya ho ho hey yo. Ya ho hey yo. Ya ho ho hey yo. Ya ho, ya ho hey yo. Joyful life, to love with all my heart and sing with all my might. Yeah, I am here to live a joyful life, to love with all my heart and sing with all my might. To choose and move on. Create and let go. To choose and move on. Create and let go. Nay, 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 nay. To choose and move on. Create and let go. To choose and move on. Create and let go.